sweeties, how are you doing? Welcome to Naya Sim. If this is your first time of coming across this channel, sweetheart, kindly smash that subscribe button and turn your notification so you are notified each time I upload, and please give this video a thumb up. I appreciate you all so much, and I'm saying massive shout out to every one of you for the love, the support you all shower me here with. I am grateful, and you all are super sweet. So today we'll be talking something very important, and it's about a video that I saw. A black man was really mad, like, saying, so the reason why we have this is because they do not want us to benefit from it. And that has actually been from the beginning of the whole thing. So let's get into this video. I mean, it's a white man who actually came out to say that why there is no single universal basic health care in America was because from the onset, they do not want black people to live. They found out that black people have inferior gene, according to them. That was according to them. So they do not have strong gene, and they are likely to fall sick, right, and die off. So we actually do not want them. And what we're gonna do is there is no need to have free health care, so that eventually, because they have inferior gene, they are gonna die off, and there will be nothing like race anymore, and we have to take care, take charge of the world and all that. But you all can see black people are still multiplying day by day and all that. I mean, like, expanding. So till this very moment, I noticed that thing that their thoughts, that their thoughts from the onset, not wanting black people to live, is still, affecting the reason why there is no free healthcare system till this very moment, because they do not want you all to benefit from it. So, and then look at how all this is happening. Most black people cannot afford some health care, because it's quite expensive in US and all that. Their own people, their own colored people that voted against their own interests, also do not have free medical care. So they, as we are suffering, they are also suffering, right? So it is them voting against their own interest, right? And still going through the same thing we are facing. And then it is their white people, the rich white men, will tell the poor white man that their problem is black people. So, hello, does this kind of make sense? Let's get into.
So we don't have universal health care because of anti-black racism?
So which led him to his second hypothesis, which was in his book, Race Traits in 1896, which was that if white people who control the politics and most of the economy of the United States simply deny health care to black people, the black race, again his phrase, would die out in 2 or 3 generations. And that would, quote, solve the race problem in America. Frederick Hoffman took this theory, pitched it to Congress, gave lectures all across the United States to state legislatures, met with governors, to physicians groups. He was beloved by those establishments. By the way, he was the co-founder of the American Lung Association. I mean, the guy was no slouch. He was powerful. He was famous, and people took him seriously. Woodrow Wilson. And this is why, in 1912, when Teddy Roosevelt proposed a single-payer health care system to cover everybody as part of his square deal plan when he was running for president for re-election, this was why that got shot down, because white people, including the medical establishment, white people by and large said, particularly the white racists in the South, said, wait a minute, if you cover everybody with health insurance, you're going to be covering black people too, and we can't have that. So that ended that discussion in 1912. It's also why they came after Franklin Roosevelt in 1936 when he proposed a single-payer system. It's why they came after Harry Truman in 1947 when he proposed a single-payer health care system. But black people, we can't do that. Black people will get that health care. And this is why they came after John Kennedy in 1961 when he proposed a single-payer health care system. And it's why when Lyndon Johnson and Robert Ball were writing the Medicare law in 1965, the Southern racist conservative senators came to them and said, you need to build into this thing a bar high enough the poor black people in the South, and 60% of black people live in the South right now. It was even a higher proportion back then in the 1960s. So the poor black people in the South won't be able to jump over that bar and show up in our all-white hospitals. So they took Medicare Part B, which is the part that pays for hospitalization, and said, we're only going to pay for 80% of the hospitalization. There'll be a 20% gap, which is the gap that you fill in with your Medigap policy now. That gap was to prevent black people from presenting themselves in hospitals unless it was just an absolute screaming life-ending emergency. So from the beginning through the 1960s, the reason why the United States never acknowledged health care as a right rather than a privilege was because of Hoffman's theories and white racism. I mean, they were just like intertwined. And American racism. I don't know how else to say it. And that prevailed right up until the 1980s, that kind of thinking and that kind of opposition to any kind of health care program.
Yes, for you guys today, talk about healthcare. It's Tom Harmon. He's the host of the Tom Harmon program. That's on Sirius XM. It's on radio stations across the country. It's on Free Speech TV. But he's also a New York Times bestselling author. And his new book is called The Hidden History of American Healthcare. Tom, welcome back to the show, brother.
Hey, Cenk, it's great to be here with you, and it's so nice to see you again.
It's great to see you, man. All right, so Tom, let's talk history as we often do. Most of the developed nations have single-payer health care, so what that means is public health insurance, right? Now, some go beyond that, the UK does, et cetera, but we don't. Why did we diverge from everyone else? How did that happen?
It really began in the 1880s, 1890s, when medicine became a thing. And there was this guy named Frederick Ludwig Hoffman who came over here from Germany. And he was a young man. He was 17, in fact, when he came over, and was a numbers genius. And he hooked up with the Prudential Life Insurance Company, ended up being a vice president. And he was the guy who figured out that there was an association, a statistical association between working in a cotton mill and having lung problems, asbestos and mesothelioma, smoking and lung cancer. He published on that in the 1910s, in the 1890s and 1910s, and diet and cancer. In fact, his book on the association between a high processed food diet and cancer is still in print. And he's been dead since 1946, but his book is still around. So he's really smart in these things. And so he married this Southern belle from Georgia who was from a racist plantation family. And so he ran the numbers on black people and found that black people were dying, dropping like flies, more likely to be sick, more likely to die of pretty much everything. And concluded, which was the general consensus at the time among a lot of white people in the South, this is again in the 1890s, that black people were genetically inferior. And in 1896, he published a book called Race, Tendencies, and Traits of the American Negro, in which he lays out all the numbers. And then he concludes that if we simply avoided allowing black people to have any access to health care, that within 2 or 3 generations, the whole race would die out, and that would solve the race problem in America. Now, it sounds kind of crazy when I just lay it out like that right now, but this led to a whole bunch of things. By the 1920s, this was referred to as scientific racism. He was testifying about it before Congress. When Teddy Roosevelt, 1912, proposed a national health care system, people said no because black people will get it. When Franklin Roosevelt proposed a national health care system, it was the same thing. We don't want black people to get it. When Truman tried it in 47, same thing. Don't want black people to get it. Right up until 1965, Senator Stennis, the Dixiecrats in the South, was quoting Hoffman, who was by then dead, but is still very famous in this field, as saying this, we have to figure out a way to keep black people from using Medicare. This is when they were passing Medicare. And the way that they came up with was to have a 20% a gap in Medicare, so that you had to pay 20% of your doctor's bill and your hospital bill. And that would discourage poor black people from showing up at the hospitals. I mean, it was the most shocking thing I discovered, Cenk, when I was doing the research on this book, is that Nearly 100% of the reason why the United States is the only country in the world that doesn't define healthcare as a right and doesn't have any sort of national healthcare system to speak of is because of racism.
That's amazing. I love when you find hidden histories.
And that's why you've got 12 states that still haven't expanded Medicaid, right? Free health insurance for low income people, all former slave states. And concluded, which was the general consensus at the time among a lot of white people in the South, this is again in the 1890s, that black people were genetically inferior. And in 1896, he published a book called Race, Tendencies, and Traits of the American Negro, in which he lays out all the numbers, and then he concludes that if we simply avoided allowing black people to have any access to health care, that within 2 or 3 generations, the whole race would die out, and that would solve the race problem in America. Now, it sounds kind of crazy when I just lay it out like that right now, but this led to a whole bunch of things. By the 1920s, this was referred to as scientific racism. He was testifying about it before Congress. When Teddy Roosevelt, 1912, proposed a national health care system, people said no because black people will get it. When Franklin Roosevelt proposed a national health care system, it was the same thing. We don't want black people to get it. When Truman tried it in 47, same thing. Don't want black people to get it. Right up until 1965, Senator Stennis, the Dixiecrats in the South, was quoting Hoffman, who was by then dead, but is still very famous in this field, as saying this. We have to figure out a way to keep black people from using Medicare. This is when they were passing Medicare. And the way that they came up with was to have a 20% a gap in Medicare, so that you had to pay 20% of your doctor's bill and your hospital bill. And that would discourage poor black people from showing up at the hospitals. I mean, it was the most shocking thing I discovered, Cenk, when I was doing the research on this book, is that nearly 100% of the reason why the United States is the only country in the world that doesn't define healthcare as a right and doesn't have any sort of national healthcare system to speak of is because of racism.
Right. It was like I was talking about the kind of like urge to be outraged instead of seek meaning. And so like think of the Southern strategy and that Lee Atwater quote, and everybody kind of lets their anger at it and their outrage at it cloud what it means, and how successful the Southern strategy was in linking economic issues in the conscious mind to racism in the subconscious mind, so that they're not dog whistles so much as like they're literally hypnotized by this stuff. And so this is exactly right, that all of this is done with a racial tinge, right? And it's linked. It's not like dog whistles aren't really like what's happening, because it's a dog whistle is just the dog's frequency is higher. This is more like Pavlov, where they've been conditioned to hear economic issues and feel racism, right? And act racially but speak economically. And so it really exposes so much of like modern conservative thought to be just drenched in subconscious racism as a matter of hypnotization and cultural and / social engineering. But yeah, I mean, but that's the value of racism, is that like the ruling class doesn't want those things. So they're using racism to deny, it's convincing them to activate that subconscious racism, when what we're talking about are issues that will help all of us, is the thing holding this culture back. But it's been done to them. It's literally been done to them. Lee Atwater admitted it. And if we can see past our outrage, what we see is a massively successful psychological warfare operation, a psyop. Right, the Southern strategy was a psyop, and we think it was like focusing on the South. What it did was turn like the country into the South for red areas. That's what it did. That's what we're living in. That's why there's all those flags everywhere. It's like, I'm in Wisconsin. What are those doing up here? The Southern strategy. It turned all of these guys into honorary Southerners by preying on the subconscious racism, that existed in everybody. I mean, I think like another thing that if we can see past our outrage, there's a very telling stat where Reagan did all this. He announced his candidacy in 1980 in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where civil rights workers were killed talking about states' rights. He activated the subconscious racism And then he won 49 of 50 states in 1984.
So what's the real reason why we're the only developed country in the world without a public health insurance or single payer health coverage? And the reason is that this is a Tom Hoffman theory, and he talked about a gentleman who, in 1896, published a book called The Race, Tendencies, and Traits of the American Negro. This is a German statistician. His name is Friedrich Hoffman, and he's a mathematic wizard, really good with statistics. And in fact, he married a Southern belle from Georgia, old racist plantation family. And this statistician wrote the book, Racial Tendencies and Traits of the American Negro. And Mr. Hoffman, he was an expert on statistics and sicknesses. He was the first to see the correlation between smoking and cancer, for example. So he noticed that the thing about Black Americans is that they were full of illnesses. They were more likely to die, more likely to be sick in every way. And he came up with a theory that this is a proof of the genetic inferiority. And he made a proposal that, as long as there's no universal health care, okay, as things progress, in about 2 to 3 generations, all the Black Americans will just die off. And this will be the final solution to America's racial problems. So this, and if you think this is some kind of French theory, this guy actually ended up testifying before Congress in the 1920s, okay? And there were multiple times before, Obamacare, where America attempted this. Teddy Roosevelt tried to, propose a national health care program, and it got shut down because blacks would get it. Freddie Roosevelt made the same attempt, and it was shut down because black people will benefit from it. Truman in 47, attempted this again. And again, it was shut down because it would benefit black people. It would ruin this plan to just simply let black people die off and solve America's race problem. And if this sounds difficult to believe, check out Tom Hartman's very well-researched book, and think about why education was free before integration. Think about all those public pools in the South that got filled up with concrete once black people were allowed to use it. America will rather damage itself rather than do anything that will benefit black Americans.
Whew. So this is all I got from this video, and this is more like a wake-up call for everybody, so we all can, I'm sure some of you know this, and for those that do not know, you just have to do the right thing. Make sure you eat right, make sure you are taking care of your health, because you all can see from the onset, they really do not wish you all well. It's glaring, it's obvious that from the beginning of the whole thing, they actually do not want you people to exist, So why would they have free health care when they do not want you people to benefit from it? Because all they wanted was, we wanted the rest thing to to die off. So we're just gonna not give them free health care because they have inferior genes or genetic whatever. As time goes on, they are just going to wipe away, and then we own the world. But I think God is greater than every other person, So it is not working the way they want. As you all can see, black people are multiplying in thousands, and to them that was not the plan. That was not the initial plan, So they wanted something to keep you all at a place. As you all can see, but this is true. It wouldn't take them anything. It wouldn't cost them a whole lot to have a universal health care, right? Because all this money they've been giving out, $100 billion, to Ukraine, to Israel, and all that. People's tax money, that is also the money you pay, right? I mean, people are paying a lot when it comes to tax. It is something that should have been used to do something great for the citizen. But why do we have to do it when they are going to benefit out of it? So for that reason, let's keep it the way it is. And then it is the rich white people telling poor white people that their problem is black when they are the cause of their problem. So the same thing they said they do not want black people to benefit. The reality is that the poor white people are also going through what black people are going through. It's on period. The rich ones can easily get medical care at any cost and all that. Same with black people. But there are some cannot cover up the cost. So when some black people are suffering, their own people are also suffering. But then they will still go ahead and vote against their interest. When they vote against their interest, they come back when it is killing them to help when they were the work, because they always think that it will never affect them, but eventually it ends up affecting them. If only they knew that most white people are being used as pawn against themselves, again, like they are being used so bad. But they are always like, instead of we to vote for black people or support black people, I mean, let's still vote for that wrong palm-colored person. And then they are suffering. Then they wake up in the midnight when they discover that they voted against their interest, and then start calling black people to help. What do you want black people to do? What can they do? So, in essence, be good. Take care of your health. You all can see the plans from the onset. And that is why the plan from the onset still stick. They do not want it to prosper. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.